and welcome. This is another Confessions podcast from your friends at Radio 2. This week's concise collection of terrible tales. See much groan-inducing alliteration we feature this week. A dire defacing, some toilet trouble, a sinful smashing and some bedwetting bedlam. Full marks so far. Here's the best stuff. Someone in the collective is very, very fragrant. Who is it? Matthew?
No.
Sal?
It's Sal.
Possibly.
Have you just refreshed?
No, I refreshed at 10 o'clock this morning.
I think...
it's, you know... Do you want to have a closer smell?
There's an extra waft coming my way, I must say, yes.
Okay.
And very pleasant it is too. Anyway, so this is tonight's confession. Thank you very much indeed to Bob, who sends this in. You can send yours via the website or on an email. Father Simon, earlier this year, you and the Sisters of Mercy forgave me for convincing an annoying American that Radio 4's shipping forecasts were in fact the cricket scores. I remember this one very well, Bob. Thank you. I've been on a bit of a roll ever since, so I think it's about time I fully clear my conscience and confess to an earlier crime, this time against the French.
Hey!
There you go. On my council estate in Essex, back in the 70s, I was considered something of a cosmopolitan. Whereas my mates had only got as far as Clacton or Southend-on-Sea for their summer holidays, I had been on a school student exchange trip to a chicken farm in Schleswig-Holstein. How about that? Hey, doesn't get much better than that. And a brief tour of Germany and Belgium with the Essex Youth Orchestra. How about that? We had we'd now all left school and had all got jobs. Those were the days. And met in our local pub to discuss our plans for the forthcoming bank holiday. Predictably, my mate said, "Let's go to Southend," which is what we always did. No, I said, because as usual it will rain and as usual we will end up being chased around the town by gangs of furious skinheads. I told them we were now men of independent financial means and that it was time for them to join the international jet set. I unveiled a plan before them, the wonders of the day trip to France. They were very excited about this and rushed off to the photo booth at Woolies to get their passport pics, then to the post office to get over the counter the 1-year passport. Again, those were the days. Number of outdated references there. In one sentence. Come the day, all was going well, and I was enjoying myself, showing off to my mates what a seasoned international traveller I was. They were wide-eyed at the exotic charms of Calais town centre and marvelled at the cheap prices of the French plonk at the supermarket. Lunch was a great success too. My mates' culinary experiences had only ever extended as far as Greasy Spoon cafes, so they were in awe of the restaurant that I took them to for an exquisite banquet, nay, a veritable gourmet extravaganza, or what the French called the 5-franc plat du jour. Now it was time for my final triumph. For the remaining 3 hours before the ferry sailed, I took them to a harbour-side bar to demonstrate to them that lager was not a girly drink, as it was considered in the 1970s. But Sur le Continent was in fact actually quite strong and therefore quite palatable. Always drink responsibly. The beers were flowing, but after an hour or so I noticed my mates becoming a bit fidgety and withdrawn. It soon became apparent that they were suffering from an affliction that affected English people back in the 1970s. Acute embarrassment at being unable to communicate in anything other than English, and B, a morbid fear of foreign toilets. They pleaded with me to find out where the toilets were and to check them out. Happy to show off my cosmopolitan ways, I strode up to the barman and in my best French boldly demanded, "Où est la toilette, s'il vous plaît?" The barman gave a surly Gallic nod towards a darkened corridor at the back of the bar. Going down this corridor, I soon found it, and it was perfectly normal, single cubicle WC with a wash basin, just like we had at home. I returned to the bar, but anxiously awaiting for me at the end of the corridor was the far more desperate member of my mates, now in the advanced stages of the wee-wee dance. "For goodness sake, they're fine," I told him. "It's up there on the left," and off he shot. On his return, he gave instructions to my 2 other anxious mates, who peeled off one after the other with the speed of an Olympic relay team. Order restored, the lager tasting continued, but Simon and I began to get a bit concerned about some of my mates' comments in the margins of our increasingly raucous conversations. Things like, "French toilets are strange, aren't they?" Or, "My dad was here in the war, he warned us about toilets like this." A bit later, it was my turn to relieve myself, and I retraced my steps down the dark corridor, and there was the perfectly normal toilet. What were my mates going on about? And then it struck me. I had done the old "my left is your right" mistake. And sure enough, on returning to the corridor, there was indeed a door on the other side that would have been à la gauche for my mates. Sheepishly, I peered inside. It was clearly a residential room with a nice bay window overlooking the channel, but it had been stripped of furniture and fittings and was clearly undergoing refurbishment. The floor had been reconcreted and the walls freshly plastered, but a hole had been left presumably for some wiring or cabling or something like that. And yes, there were 3 telltale indications that this was what my mates had thought was the legendary French loo. Well, you get told it's a hole in the ground. Just look for that. Yes, says Bob, my idiot, inexperienced mates had mistaken the empty room with a hole in the floor for Les Toilettes. I hurriedly bundled my mates out of the bar before the electricity shorted, and we legged it to the ferry where we hid on the top deck until it sailed, expecting to be boarded by angry gendarmes at any moment. So I beg forgiveness from the French bar owner, who probably to this day thinks that the French are idiots, and for the christening of his freshly replastered room. In mitigation, I would say that on our return, we all had our first chance as adults to take part in the British electoral system, and we all voted to join the common market back in 1975 in the referendum. So it could be argued that we've paid for our mistakes ever since, in the words of Bob on today's Eurosceptic email. We're not in one of those difficult periods, are we? So we can say that. So, Sister Rebecca, what do you say? It's the Brits abroad.
I remember Bob's confession about the shipping forecast. I loved that one.
Yeah.
I like this one as well, but really, you've got to say, how stupid were his mates? I mean, really, wasn't it obvious? It was a building site, for goodness sake. So I think even though Bob made the mistake of confusing his left from his right, it wasn't intentional, total mistake, and it is a very, very funny anecdote. So for all those reasons, Bob, you are forgiven.
Thank you. Now the Mother Superior.
Yeah, the mates were very stupid, but I would also say they were probably very drunk, so they didn't really care or really know what they were doing, going to a... I mean, it's obvious, isn't it? If you go into a room and it just has a hole in, no other bathroom paraphernalia, like towels or soap or sinks.
Sometimes that is all you had in the old days.
But it was at least enamelled, wasn't it? It had, like, bathroom stuff in it, so that you wouldn't,
Places where your feet had to go.
I just think they were really drunk and very silly. And by the way, one of the things that really irritates me beyond belief is when I go to France and you have people sitting around and they don't know how to speak French, and they get all cross because they think that everybody in the world should speak English. So that's my little moan of the day.
It's got nothing to do with the confession.
No, it hasn't. But as for you, I'm going to say you're totally forgiven.
What do you say then, Brother Matt?
I remember getting a 1-year passport and then thinking when I go to France, all I'm going to be faced with as far as the toilet's concerned is a hole in the ground. So I can see why they would be confused. But they are also, as Rebecca points out, very thick. And for that reason, I wasn't going to forgive. But then he did refer to us as the Sisters of Mercy at the start.
He did, yes.
And frankly, I was won over from as soon as he said that. Whatever he was going to say, I was going to forgive. So well done.
Here's tonight's confession. Thank you very much for all these. You can go via the website bbc.co.uk/radio2. Look for the drive time pages. You can just email if you wish. confessions@bbc.co.uk. This is from Bad Brother. Bad Brother says, Dear Father Simon and the Gathered Collective, I seek forgiveness for a misdemeanour. It occurred 27 years ago in the summer of 1985. Madonna was at the top of the charts with Into the Groove, more about that later, with Back to the Future, the big hit at the cinema. My elder sister at the time was 12 years old, and I a mere 8. It's another kind of brother-sister story. My sister and I were both happy kids and relatively bright with good grades at school. However, the major difference between the two of us was swottiness. My sister was the biggest swot ever. For example, always getting in from school and doing her homework straight away. What's that about? Whereas I, on the other hand, dumped my coat, bag in the house, rushed back out to do what all kids should be doing, playing football with your mates or riding my bike, and then at the last possible moment doing my homework as fast as possible and not really caring that much about the content. We were both bright, but in all honesty, I was brighter than my sister, as my parents kept reminding me, but she would always get the higher grades, better spelling test results, better exam results. My mum and dad would constantly come out with, if only you worked half as hard as your sister, you'd be top of the class. And this is where my problem starts. If it were not for the super swot, I wouldn't have got into all this trouble. Miss Teacher's pet would join all the after-school clubs and be really committed to whatever she put all her efforts into, and would invariably end up getting full marks for everything. She had certificates galore. Certificates for all the various levels, beginner, intermediate, advanced, expert for gymnastics, certificates for swimming, certificates for spelling, you name it, she had a certificate for it. In fact, the only one she didn't seem to have was certificate for the biggest brown nose award, which I think she more than deserved. Anyway, all these certificates were adorned on her bedroom wall, and yes, amidst the Duran Duran and Aha posters, there was the certificate shrine, her pride and joy. If friends came round, then the pesky, immature 8-year-old brother was banished out of her bedroom, while my sister and her mates would chat and gossip, and I wasn't allowed to cramp their style. I could hear her through the door, and her self-righteous tone, she would boast to her mates about yet another certificate being added to the shrine. My sister was a big Madonna fan. She'd purchased her first UK #1 single, Into the Groove. She played it constantly on her turntable. I'm nothing particularly against Madonna. I'm not her biggest fan, but she's okay. However, this record was played and played and played. When I asked Mum and Dad to tell her to turn that racket down, as they often shouted at me, all I got was, well, she's done really well at school this week, so she can get another certificate. She's got another certificate for swimming. She can play her music as loud as she wants. This was not the answer I was expecting. So, Simon, that was it. This was the straw that broke the camel's back, and after a few more airings of Into the Groove, my sister decided to go out and play for once, and I sensed my opportunity. The red mist descended upon me, and without really thinking, I grabbed the nearest felt tip, went into my sister's bedroom and wrote "My sister stinks" on every single certificate, and there must have been at least 20. And then I went out to play. Later that evening, just after tea, my sister had finished her meal, first, of course, and went upstairs to bedroom to do her work. An almighty scream rang out throughout the house. My parents, looking startled, ran upstairs to the bedroom, whilst I sat there thinking, perhaps that prank wasn't such a good idea after all. I was summoned upstairs to face the music, and my dad said sternly, "Have you done this?" Now, I know he's not a police investigator and is unlikely to be in CSI, but it really didn't need Sherlock Holmes' powers of deduction to figure out, because there are only two of us, that the guilty party had written "My sister stinks" plastered all over the wall. It was clearly the brother. Yes, I quivered, unable to think of such a witty comeback and petrified of the trouble I was now in. There was really no denying it was me. My sister, by this time in floods of tears, kept telling me that she hated me and would never forgive me. It took my parents ages to calm her down, this being achieved by grounding me for 2 whole weeks, and by making an emergency purchase of liquid paper to cover up my harsh words. But because I'd written the offensive words heavily, you could still quite clearly see the outlines indented beneath once it had all dried. The certificates were never quite the same after I'd defaced them, and so I seek forgiveness for this terrible deed. I can only blame the red mist, as this was completely out of character. Even now, when my own kids get certificates from school and stick them up on their wall, I still feel the shame of my actions all those years ago, and only the forgiveness of your holy collective, yes, you, gathered here, can finally shift the guilt. Although it has to be said, my sister is now a teacher, and she's still dead swatty, says Bad Brother. My sister stinks as my favourite bit, when Dad says, "Did you do this?" Well, I wonder who else might have done it. Sister Rebecca, do you forgive the big brother, big bad brother?
The idea of a certificate shrine, I mean, that is irritating, isn't it? A shrine of 20 certificates, and telling your mates about it when they come over to play. And also, I mean, I remember when we used to have those singles and you'd play it again and again and again. I used to do that and my friends would go crazy.
Was it Nick Hayward?
It wasn't, actually. It was that really annoying song called Good Life. Do you remember that song?
Yes.
Just really, really repetitive. And in a city, every single morning I would put that on about 5 times, and it does get very annoying. So I think he had good reason, and I can understand the red mist. And also, he's already served his punishment. He had to, suspended for 2 weeks. So, yes. Bad Brother, you're completely forgiven.
What do you say, Mother Superior?
Bad Brother, I'm not happy. This is not a nice thing to have done to your lovely little sister. She was different from you. She worked hard. I think you were just jealous of her success, to be quite honest with you. I think it was mean. And also, I think it was a rubbish prank. I think if you wanted to get back at her, just writing "My sister stinks" on a few certificates is not really very imaginative, and it's not very intelligent. You could have done it in other ways. I just think, no, you shouldn't really have done this. And as far as I'm concerned, it was jealous rage. It was nothing to do with
So he's jealous and
red
thick,
mist.
is what you're saying?
Well, that's what I think. So, Bad Brother, you're not forgiven.
Brother Matt, what do you say?
Bad Brother pretty much knows what's coming anyway, because he wouldn't have called himself Bad Brother otherwise. I think the question needs to be asked about the school here. What's going on with this school and this inferiority complex where it's giving certificates out for everything? You got certificates for swimming, certificates for spelling, certificates for having a tongue, certificates for having vowels, and certificates for being able to say the word certificate. I mean, yeah, absolutely nonsense. So I can't say it because it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So I'm going to say it's the school's fault and not the Bad Brother. He frankly was led into it by this school with the inferiority complex.
Have you got a parents' evening coming up soon?
Yes, I have. Yes, not expecting any certificates there either.
What is the cause of hilarity, Rebecca?
I was just trying to teach Sally how to adjust the back of her chair.
It's one of those ergonomic things that you just don't know how to work it. So I prostrate while I'm doing.
Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Well, if you can just lie down on our luxurious carpet over there before it gets changed to the new Steve Wright carpet, deep pile.
Yes.
In the meantime, we just have to make do with
Not
our
unattractive though.
cardboard.
Simon. Not attractive.
It's hideous. It's the worst carpet I've ever seen.
Well, it's not.
It's Student Union 1970s carpet.
It's more like a Vauxhall Viva showroom carpet.
It's designed to have beer spilt over it and to go sticky. Anyway, tonight's tale, here it is, because the Confessions music is running. This comes from pseudonym. Okay.
Hilarious!
How about that?
Well done.
Already funny.
Yeah.
Father Simon and the Urban Forgiveness Collective. Now, I have to say, this relates precisely to Alan Davis being on the programme yesterday, and he told us almost exactly the same as this one, and I think it happened to his wife's family. So clearly, my conclusion is, if it happened to Alan Davis' wife's family, and it happened to Sue Denim, then maybe there's an awful lot of this kind of thing going on. It's another brother-sister kind of jealousy story. Your ever-generous and forgiving nature has given me the courage to finally confess to a cruel act of my childhood in the hope of ridding myself of a guilt that has plagued me for nearly 20 years. My confession relates to my younger sister. She arrived, much to my disgust, when I was 18 months old, and since then has actually been my closest friend, my bitter rival, and at times just a big pest. Our rivalry was at its height when I was 7 and she was 6. We competed constantly for our parents' affection and to be the favourite daughter. This was only made worse by the announcement in our family that we were expecting a new baby brother. My sister and I were particularly upset by this news, as when asked by our parents whether we would like a puppy or a baby brother, as a reward for being such good girls, we both picked a puppy. This must have been upsetting for our mother, who was already pregnant. It was kind of a daft question to ask, really. But anyway. It was after this announcement that I decided action was required to secure myself the position of favourite daughter. My sister had not wet the bed for many years, and so I'm not sure what gave me the inspiration for my plan, but inspiration it was. I asked my parents one night if I could have a glass of water by my bed, just in case I got thirsty. They agreed to this seemingly harmless idea, and so it was that I, chuckling to myself under the covers, went to bed that night with a full glass of water next to me. When I was certain that everyone was asleep, I crept to my sister's bed, stealthy as a fox, and gently peeled back her bed covers. She did not stir. Cautiously, with a quick glance around to ensure I was alone, I proceeded to pour the contents of the water all over her bed. Job done, I returned to my own bed. My sister awoke the following morning and found her bed and pyjama bottoms to be extremely damp. Upset, she went to confess to our parents in a meek and embarrassed voice that she had in fact just wet the bed. Although I would like to claim that this was part of my evil genius, it was by a stroke of luck that my mother was confined to bed that morning with a horrible bout of morning sickness. As such, it was my father, who has almost no sense of smell, who came to change the sheets. Had it been my mother, she would almost certainly been able to tell that actually it was just water. And she wouldn't have received the stern talking to that she got that morning from my father. And so I would like to apologise to my sister, who still, to this day, thinks it was her and not her sweet, sweet sister, and seek forgiveness from yourselves and your listeners, not just for the trouble that I got her into that morning, but also for the fact that she always seemed a little nervous about going to sleepovers at her friends' houses after this. I believe she has now got over this fear, which is an important fact that I hope you will consider when deliberating on my case. No permanent damage was done. Is that so? Pseudonym, who is just confessing now to her younger sister that she didn't have a problem. She didn't have to be nervous when going on sleepovers. It was, in fact, her with a glass of water, which is exactly, I believe, what Alan Davis was confessing to yesterday on behalf of his wife. So maybe, Sister Rebecca, a lot of this kind of thing goes on.
Well, I hope this isn't giving ideas to older siblings around the country. Oh, this is a way of winding up my young brother or sister. It's lucky that the young sister didn't have to start wearing a nappy again, because that is, one of the possibilities is that the parents thought the following night, even though you're 6,
at 6
you better put some pull-ups on. I do feel sorry for the little sister getting the harsh talking to for wetting the bed as well. So I think
old-fashioned parenting.
Well, yeah, maybe exactly. In
these liberal days.
Yeah, you just say, oh, never mind. Yeah, I think it was a bit mean, actually. So, pseudonym, you're not forgiven.
OK, Mother Superior.
Well, I know quite a bit about bedwetting, and not from personal experience, but because one of my members, one of my brothers, had a bit of a problem. And I can tell you that when somebody wets the bed, it's not just the water. I remember him getting out of bed and steam rising from the bed.
Really?
Because that's the kind of effect it has. So I don't know why Dad wouldn't have... Well, maybe he just didn't do it enough. But also, I would have thought it would have been quite obvious because there's a smell.
Yeah, well, no sense of smell. That's why she said my dad's got no sense of smell.
Oh, right, OK.
That was the key bit in the...
Well, no, I must have dropped off again during that bit. But, yeah, so I don't know, though. You know, this is silly, childish stuff, pranks. You know, you don't really think it through, do you? You must have had horrible experiences with your sister and brother at some point.
No, they wouldn't. No.
Really?
I don't think so.
Never?
My brother did hit me a few times, but apart from that...
Really?
Yeah.
Oh. Well, I would say I will forgive you.
I'm 6 years older than him, by the way, so I don't know what he was doing.
And he hit you?
Yeah.
Wimp. Anyway, you're forgiven.
Thank you very much indeed. So it's 1-1, basically. A puzzled-looking brother Matthew.
Well, I hate to come over as the liberal here, but, I mean, what's this father doing, giving her a stern talk? I mean, hardly, that's not the way for a parent to act. I mean, you know, what on earth is going on with this man? And also, why is she keeping this a secret for so many years? I'd be absolutely aghast if I was that sister, and I would be giving her a stern talking to, and my father, 20 years later, frankly. Yes. Well, it's absolute disgraceful. She's not forgiven, and neither is the father, who I've decided to now put in the dock as well.
All right, OK, so it's all kind of his fault.
Yes, it's all his fault.
Tonight's confession, here's my prediction. Matt will forgive, Mother Superior will not forgive, not sure about Sister Rebecca. Let's see what it says. It's from Mr. G. Thank you, Mr. G. Dear Father Simon and the Respectable Collective, my confession harks back to the early noughties, when I was just 13 years old, enjoying my well-earned school holiday. One Friday towards the end of our break, my best friend Bob and I got our hands on the brand new Championship Manager game. Do you just want to explain what that is, Matt?
It's a way of losing your life. I almost failed my degree because of it. It's basically you manage a team, and if they do well, you're on it forever.
It's a computer game?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sounds exciting.
Got our hands on the brand new Championship Manager game, something that we'd been waiting many, many months for. Bob often had foreign students staying at his house. On this particular Friday, 2 new Belgian students had arrived, Nigel and Ollie. Ollie was very friendly and enjoyed talking about football with us, whilst Nigel just seemed to mock us for being so childish for playing computer games, with a series of underhand sniggers and rolls of the eyes. I'm not sure what an underhand snigger would look like or sound like. Anyway, that's what Nigel the Belgian got up to. The next morning, I was woken up by my match of the day alarm clock and immediately ran up to Bob's house to... Mother Superior, head in hands already. And immediately ran up to Bob's house to continue our pulsating debut season on Championship Manager. I knocked on the door, barely able to contain my joy and excitement about the day that lay ahead, when I was greeted by a very sombre Bob. He let me in, and there, sitting on one of our red spinny computer chairs with his feet up on the other, was Nigel the Belgian student. He'd begun his own season and had no intention of letting us play. Bob and I watched the hours tick past, whilst Nigel enjoyed the season of playing on our game. Ollie offered to play a different game with us to try and stem the pure hatred that we now had for Nigel, but it was no use. Nothing could fill the void of playing Championship Manager. The next day it happened again. I ran up to Bob's house only to be greeted again with the Belgian Lex Luthor, grinning from ear to ear and continuing to wipe his big clowny feet over my red spinning chair. There you go. Shoes into the subject again. Needless to say, we had to take action, and it started like all good 13-year-olds do by telling Bob's parents. After our discussion, Bob's mum went into the computer room, where somehow seconds before Nigel had managed to remove his feet from the chair and place that, "Oh, butter wouldn't melt in my mouth" look on his face. "Nigel, can we share the computer, please? Why don't you and the boys take turns?" said Bob's mum. Nigel replied in broken English, "Well, we don't have to play the computer at home because, you see,
Is that your Jean-Claude Van Damme impression?
Great.
We don't have a computer at home.
We don't have the computers.
We don't have much money and spend time working for the family. Life is tough in Belgium. We are very poor. And your father smells of elderberries." It was clear to see that Bob's mum...
Not a Belgian accent. That's more like...
He was Walloon.
He was what?
Walloon.
What's Walloon?
As opposed to Flemish. It's half of Belgium.
Oh, OK.
Get with the times. It was clear to see that Bob's mum's heart had melted at the thought of this, because he was working so hard and all that. And even more obvious when she turned to us and said, "Come on, boys, it's only for a couple of days." We walked away from the computer to hear Nigel clear his throat, drawing attention to his clown feet that were back on the chair, and gave us what can only be described as a Ronaldo wink straight at us. Later that afternoon, we went into Bob's parents' room with Ollie to choose a board game to play. Kaplunk seemed the unanimous choice, but due to the size of the box, it had got lodged in the drawer. With one swift, satisfying yank, the box was free. But unfortunately, from the top shelf, Bob's mum's most treasured china plate came down a crashing and a kaplunking all over the place. All three of us looked down at the 27 pieces we counted of expensive china that were now scattered over the floor. We knew we were in big trouble. We cleared the mess up, put the board game away, and removed any evidence. 4 hours later, when we were watching a DVD, Bob and I were summoned by his mum, dragged downstairs and interrogated to see if we knew where the plate was. "No," we answered. "We've been downstairs watching the telly, but..." "But what?" said Bob's mum. "But we did see Nigel the Belgian looking for some instructions in the drawer earlier." Bob's mum marched down the stairs into the computer room at a considerable pace, greeted Nigel with a stern, take your feet off the chair look, which he obliged, and sat trying to put on a I've had a real hard life kind of face. "Have you been in my room?" she asked. "No," was the reply. Bob then tapped... So you can't really do much accent with one word, can you? No. Bob then tapped his mum on the shoulder and began whispering in her ear. I turned to Nigel, looked him in the eye and gave him my own Ronaldo wink. Bob's mum picked up Nigel's hoodie, and out of the front pocket fell roughly 27 pieces of the china plate in a carrier bag, and the Championship manager instructions. Nigel was immediately sent to his room and subsequently banned from the computer for the entire time that he was with us, and he got banned from the trip to the zoo. Myself, Bob and Ollie, on the other hand, had 5 long days playing Championship manager before school started. I know you want to play Championship manager when you get home.
Can't wait.
And so, Simon, I beg forgiveness from the collective, not for what we did to Nigel, but the anguish we caused Bob's mum after smashing her prize plate. And if Bob's mum is listening, we found out a few weeks later from a postcard that Nigel's family are in fact very wealthy and that he doesn't have to work every day because life is not tough in Belgium, as we all know. So he was lying. He was a barefaced Belgian. What do you say to that, Sister Rebecca?
Well, I was about to say, yeah, it depends on whether Nigel really was poor. If he had to wear clown shoes, it sounds like he was poor. But then you just tell me that... no, I know he had big feet. So he really was wealthy. So I think it was a bit of a stitch-up, though, to hide those broken pieces of plate in his pocket. But then, the fact that he was rich... I think I was on the fence. Well, that
he's rich or not?
Well, he lied. He lied.
This is the kind of thing Matt's going to come up with in a moment.
Class war, here we go.
Barefaced lie, saying that he'd never played on a computer game before, therefore he should be able to monopolise it for the next few days. So I think, on reflection, Mr. G, you are forgiven.
So what do we get from Mother Superior?
Oh, don't get me started. Match of the day clock. She's probably got a little duvet with Nottingham Forest written all over it and a little pillow saying, Ronaldo. What is, by the way, Ronaldo wink? What is a Ronaldo wink?
It's a wink.
Yeah, but what is it?
It's a wink
It's
which
a
says...
wink.
I've
Has
just...
he got funny eyes or something?
No, it's saying, I've just got away with an outrageous thing and you didn't notice, referee.
Well, that's not necessarily Ronaldo wink. I think this was really rather mean. They're not silly little children like we had yesterday. They did know better to lie and to put somebody else into a position where they couldn't play a computer game for the rest of their time. So, as far as I'm concerned, you are definitely not forgiven.
Thought so, Brother Matthew.
It's worth saying that there are other football management games available other than Championship Manager, but I'm sure they're very happy with the number of mentions they've had so far. Yes. Well done. It is highly addictive, and I can testify to that. So I can understand why Nigel the Belgian was on for so long. What I can't understand is why he thinks it's all right to put his feet on the chair. What's that about? When you're in someone else's house, putting your feet on the chair, I would go spur.
If
that was my chair and he was in my house and he's putting his big clown feet on, I would go nuts. Belgian or not, rich or not, get your feet off my chair. So I am not going to forgive. No, I am going to forgive.
What?
I am forgiving because Nigel's Belgian and putting his feet on my chair.
OK, the people's verdict, please. Do you forgive tonight's confession from Mr. G, 88291, sort of computer game-based confessions. I think that might work. Belgian confessions.
Yeah, definitely loads of Belgian confessions, please.
Walloon confessions.
Yes. Nigel confessions.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff. You can do it. You can go online, bbc.co.uk/radio 2, look for the drive time pages. You can send us your confession, or you can send us an email, confessions@bbc.co.uk. Thank you. Well, the question is, who did you forgive? Let us know. Send us your confession too, and more for you next week.
Thanks for listening to this BBC Radio 2 free download. Now, why not try more?
Jazz for me, I guess, is improvisation.
My pick of the best in rhythm and blues.
Music from Richard Thompson, Chris Wood and Pentangle, amongst many, many others.
All at the BBC Radio 2 website.